So like I dropped out of high school as a freshman. I got into the trades as like a young person. And so I was doing low voltage electrical contracting. I did that up to getting like my first SDR job, right?
Everything I learned was outside of college that got me here today.
Someone saying like, "Oh, I know you're into guitars," is not going to increase the likelihood of you buying Salesforce ever, ever, ever. If the only way you can connect with your market is have like one individual research that person a bunch to make them feel really nice, and if they don't do that, no one gives a shit about what you do. That's not like an ascendant version of go to market. If you think this is going to go really well, my preference would be half of our volume. We'll do it your way. Let me do it my way, half of it. In 2 weeks, we'll be able to talk about who's right. How's that sound? You know?
Hey guys, welcome. We have Kellen and Patrick here on Prospecting Pros. Welcome to the show.
Thanks, man. Good to be here.
Yeah, a Bay Area native. Kellen and I grew up about 15 minutes from each other, but we didn't know each other until we got into the whole LinkedIn world, business world, and still haven't met up in person. So at some point that would be great.
Ellen and I know each other through a few mutual contacts. Like you had worked with Barrett in the past, and then I worked with Barrett, and then that's kind of how we met each other. And then we met up a few times in the Bay Area. Actually, cool story. Kellen actually sent me a pair of sneakers at my last job, and I still wear them to this day. A pair of yellow Jordans.
Yep.
Nice.
I forget what was that for. That was like a referral or something, right? You did something sick. Yeah.
Cool. So you guys have met up in person a few times.
Yep.
Yeah.
Cool. Well, Kellen, tell us a little bit about, your work experience, how you got to where you are today, the company you're running. Give us the rundown.
Yeah. So I started. Me and Patrick share like kind of like an adoration for like our beginnings because it's a little atypical. So like I dropped out of high school as a freshman. I got into the trades as like a young person, and so I was doing low voltage electrical contracting. I did that up to getting like my first SDR job, right? I had like a typical SDR experience. Switched to AE, head of go to market. Then I joined a company as like a lead like consultant basically, and then started my business today.
Did I hear that right? Did you say drop out of high school or drop out of college?
Yeah, high school, freshman year, one quarter in.
Really?
I have a college degree. Yeah, I started doing like junior college and working full time as a 16-year-old.
So you have a ton of work experience.
Yeah. That's like kind of a big advantage for sure.
Yeah, I would say, so I went to high school, then went to college, like a nice private school in Southern California, and like everything I learned was outside of college that got me here today. Like it helped me with some communication stuff and like be more responsible, but like work wise, it was all job experience. So I think just having that extra for you, having extra experience is probably only helpful to where you are today. So tell us a little bit about your company. What do you do now? I see you have multiple, like you're a partner of Smart Lead, Clay. Like tell us about that, and then also about the Deal Lab.
Yeah, absolutely. So the job before the Deal Lab, I was working for what was called Apex Revenue, right? Like it became Phone Ready Leads, 𝐼TANx, today Joey Gilkey. And essentially we were doing fractional VP of sales, building outbound sales teams, right? And so I would get embedded and we'd set up like a tech stack and process and hiring. And we kind of do like 0 to 100 for like outbound programs, right? And so we were doing like a 6-month, 120 grand, like all in offer, where, plus they would hire the rep, plus take on like these tech contracts. And so sort of like a big project, right? Oftentimes this was like $1 to $3 million like EBITDA, either like service businesses or bootstrap software that was like doing well, some sort of business that like had the funds to do this. They wanted to move towards kind of like 10 million, right? And so they were investing in doing outbound. 2/3 of the time, these projects would just go like amazingly. Like we'd have clients that just have like crazy, they double their revenue and they're like, oh my God, this is insane. And then like 1/3 of the time, it would be, as you guys can imagine, like what I call an uphill pipeline environment. Basically, like you take the market, you take what you do, you take a decent rep, like you kind of do like the Pareto of everything, and it doesn't work. And you're like, okay, in order for this to work, we're really gonna have to squeeze some stuff out, right? And so in those environments, the model that we sold was not really the best suited for these clients because it was like Kellen has a lot of ideas. We have a model that is like semi-productized, and then we have these kind of junior reps. And so if the job to be done was like figure out messaging and like how to actually create pipeline, the environment we had wasn't set up well for that exactly. You know what I mean? And so I saw that and I was like, Basically there's like this inherent friction where like I'm interfacing clients and reps. Like we had between Joey and I, there's like the COO guy who Joey had hired to like help productize the business a little bit. And basically like me and that guy butted heads a little bit because he had like a vision of a model he wanted us doing. And I'm like, that's not going to get us the results we need. Like, I think we need to do this. And so ultimately, I got myself promoted to off the team of that environment. And, in 0 seconds, I'm like, I'm doing my own business. I know exactly what I'm doing because it's like fixing this thing that like I was just, I kind of knew what was coming because I was being very high friction. Right. And so my business started with this idea of like message market fit testing, right? Like segment a market really, really granularly, come up with sort of different like messaging angles, test and validate them using like outbound as the vehicle of that, with the goal not being necessarily like be a lead gen agency, but more of like figure out your messaging so that you can do whatever you want with that, right? You can send more emails, you could set up multi-channel, you could whatever you want to do. And so day one, that was the business. Over time, what happened is like we became a smart lead partner, we became a Clay partner, like that type of kind of fractional like agency type thing got more popular. And so we do a lot more like systems, like done for you cold email stuff, TAM mapping and things like that. But it sort of starts from this idea of like niche market definition and like message market fit.
Nice. And so do you ever run into issues where, not issues, but like you start with a client, you get the job done, you help them understand who they should be reaching out to, better understand their ICP and message market fit. Does it ever like you get the job done and how long do these relationships typically last, or is it something where they're happy and it's an ongoing thing and they'll stay on for a long time?
Yeah. So when we first started, I really wanted to be like different than lead gen, right? And so like we would target 1,000 contacts across 5 different campaigns, like 200 each, to like do this testing, right? And so as you can imagine, even when that goes well, let's say you set 10 meetings, which would be like really, really, really good, right? For like 10 random contact, so it's like you set 10 meetings for that. Like 10 meetings isn't going to get anyone anywhere, right? Exciting. And so it's kind of like, even if you're just crushing it, there's like this net volume if they're looking at you of like producing pipeline, right? So at first we were kind of like, well, we're not pipeline centric, but we would win and then like get fired because it's like, well, we need to go do something else. So the first thing we did was expand like volume of sending. So we could be like, hey, we'll send more of this, that starts to be a little bit more like a lead gen sort of motion. Like our clients are either like a founder who's kind of doing nothing and we will, and like supplying some amount of pipeline and sort of like partnership through like strategy, is helpful. And then they might have like some reps and it's sort of like supplementing the rep motion. And then once they're a little bit bigger than that and they're like have directors and sales development teams and stuff, that's where it starts to like we've also added things there like kind of being a little bit more infrastructural to them where it's like data operations, a little bit of kind of like RevOps stuff. But most of our clients are sort of like we do tactical things that they could probably do other places, other ways, and then they're kind of like working with us to have like our strategic brain behind it, and then the flip of that is like instead of just being like a consultant who's like, hey, we can talk to you about cool ideas, it's like we actually have a bunch of execution arms about what we can do that we can like live fire, like prove it out and test it and keep the feedback loop really tight because we can like ideate, execute, analyze like super fast. So people, we have clients that are like with us over a year. We have like some of those people, we have some clients that like bought one thing, never changed anything this whole time. We have other people that have probably had like 4 different iterations of what we do because it's like, oh, like we invalidated that. What's the next job to be done? Like, oh, figure this out. Okay, this works and let's do this. That didn't work, stuff like that.
Would you say that your like core customer base is early stage, or like do you work with anybody that's later in the process, like Series B, Series C, like it, because it kind of sounds like somebody that's trying to figure stuff out at the beginning, but maybe I'm misinterpreting that.
So like the early offer definitely was like figure things out at the beginning. I think over time that like it's always going to be someone trying to figure something out, so to speak, or who has something to be figured out. But like we have like a Series E client where like they have like 5 different kind of like directors in the like sales development demand gen arena, right? And they have like 3 different sort of markets. Each of those markets has different like slice. So there's just like a lot of like constant demand of like, we have this niche list. Can we get this enriched? Like, can we build this CRM utility that like in the background researches this thing. You know, we've niche data projects come up a lot, right? So like as it gets later on, like this one, they need like first responder data tied to like departments. And so, you know, as like if you were to go into Zoom Info, you'll have like SFPD at sfpd.org, but that's actually like, you know, 50 different like San Francisco police departments. And so in order to get that type of stuff, like no data tool has this. These directors don't, you know, they're like conceptually we know this exists, but we don't know how to like actually systemize this and like operationalize it. And we might come in and be like, cool, let's like map this data out, build a flow of like distribution to the team, and then we will be sort of like unit there.
Your mic cut out for a little bit. I don't know if you heard that
Covered
too.
it or something.
That's super weird.
Now it's sounding a little bit better.
Okay, let me see. I'll just put this right in my face because it was okay.
Yeah, I mean you could hear you, but it just dropped. The volume dropped
yeah.
quite low for a little
Weird.
bit.
Yeah, and so sort of like earlier stage teams is going to be more about like messaging, figuring out. I think later on it becomes like data accessibility, cleanliness, and then like operationalizing things. And then also like later stage companies, it might be like you have 10 reps, you have 10,000 companies in your market. I'll help you like on a monthly basis, prioritize those accounts, distribute the top 10%, 15% to these reps, take the next 30, 40% that you guys would otherwise completely ignore and like run cold email against it as an example, like at scale or something like that. We had a discovery called like a $17 billion company the other day, which was pretty sick. I don't know if it's going to go anywhere, but it's, yeah. So it's sort of like a broad spectrum. Really, it's kind of just, it's always going to be someone though, who's like, I have this problem, I'm trying to solve it versus sort of like just, hey, do you want to like maintain this thing that I need done forever?
Yeah, it seems like it would be a fit for companies that are early stage trying to figure things out, but there's also like everyone's always trying to figure things out. Like, you really just can't do the same thing forever. And some of our big clients actually they're releasing a new type of product or they're going into a new market such as the United States and they want to test that out. So they may not be new to the game. They might be around and be a massive company, but they are trying to test and figure something out. I think what you do is very interesting because I don't hear anybody else really focus on that. And maybe I'm missing it, but like that's really cool that you really help. Like that is your offer. Like you're helping people figure that out. Do you? And it's mainly through email, right? Not any other channels.
Yeah, sort of. So like we will do done for you email where we'll be sending emails. We've done mailer campaigns using like handwritten, right? Because you can do like the same motion. And then like it's sort of like if we're doing earlier stage companies, we do execution and it'll be via email. Later stage companies, it's usually more like strategy, like data and operations, and then like a team is actually doing like the execution side, or we are supplementing their team's execution with the cold email.
Random question. So I used to be into email quite a bit. I've backed off on it just because it seems to be a harder channel, and I hired people to take care of some of the deliverability aspect of things. What has email been like over the past 2 years in terms of the deliverability setup, and like how has it changed over time? And then a second part to that question is where do you see it going?
Yeah, like it's funny because I'm one of the like I think least I hire people and they'll be like, what the hell? Like this is how, because there's a lot of like really, really, really crazy niche like deliverability like ideas out there. So when I started, we would just send from Google. We would buy from Google, set up in like the Google panels. You know, Jesse Olett helped us like a ton, you know, like he helped so many others. And so we did all Google for probably the first year or so, right? And again, we were sending kind of like that lower volume, so we didn't have. So one of the reasons we would also do the low volume thing is like not stress the deliverability aspect, right? It's kind of like we're not going to be approaching this from like we're going to send a crazy amount of emails, and so there's going to be all of these issues, and so our business is focused on like firefighting deliverability. And so we're going to target really, really well with really, really, really intentional messaging. So the likelihood that we're going to have any of these issues is extremely low. So we did Google stuff for year and a half only. I would say like no issues that I'm, you know, that
when you say low volume, like what? Are you talking like 40 or are you talking like 15?
Yeah. Well, so lower volume in general as well. So like one client to 1,000 contacts means like each contact being targeted is going to be a lot better of a fit than people who are doing like 20,000 contacts a month, which is, you know, rampant. And so we would send like day one, I think we would send 35 out from Google inboxes a day. Like today, I think we do 25 and 20, depending on how well we think things are performing, because each inbox sends so low. So you have like low, so because this is like, yeah, and it's because that's like the gamify Outlook thing, you know what I mean? And then like private servers, there's like potentially lower deliverability in general, but you don't have to abide by Google or Outlook on the send side. So there's like, so to me, the lens is like, it's good to have kind of the OEM stuff because presumably they're going to like support their stuff the best. It's good to have redundancy. So anything you have could completely fail and it won't slow you down. And I think a lot of people blame deliverability for like terrible targeting, terrible messaging. And just like that, you know, it's kind of like, I don't know. The lead gen space is weird because there's a lot of people that kind of like blindly are like, this is what we can do for you. And, you know, you guys know it's like that, you can't, that doesn't exist, you know? So I think a lot of people are just willing to like, I guarantee this, I'm either going to like get close to hitting it and, you know, account manage you forward in perpetuity, or I'm going to miss it so bad you're going to fire me and I'm just like on to the next one.
This episode is sponsored by Level Up Leads, a B2B sales development and appointment setting agency. Companies always need pipeline, but they oftentimes don't want to hire SDRs internally. The whole process is risky and expensive. You've got hiring costs, onboarding, training, additional spend on your tech stack, a few months to ramp up. And with that being said, SDRs are a high turnover position, and the person you hire might not necessarily work out, so you need to start all over again. That's why companies outsource this. Level Up Leads allocates a team of people, their tech stack, so you can onboard and launch your campaigns in about a week. They set qualified meetings in your calendar so your team has more selling opportunities. Visit levelupleads.io today to learn more. All right, now back to the show.
Do you ever have issues to like you're trying to figure something out for a client, but you're not quite getting the responses? Or do you kind of more so like do you kind of catch people off guard in the sense that you're not saying, hey, can I send you more information? Or, hey, can we jump on a call? But you're more like the call to action is just a lot different than what someone's used to, which increases the response rate.
No, because our emails, like, so it's like the way that we test things is still essentially just doing the like, go sell this motion type thing, right? And so the people, so like our messages are just good because they're like good targeting, good messaging, you know what I mean? But it's still like basic, like I would say if anything, we're like heavy on just push for meetings and everything. Like it's kind of like people will vote with their time is basically my lens. And it's like whatever thing you could learn, you're just going to translate that into going to try to set meetings anyways. So it's like you might as well just test via the thing that you're literally going to do with it. And so, I feel like I missed the first part.
I don't remember either. Patrick,
I don't know either.
Help us out.
But so the question I wanted to ask is about, and you don't have to give away any trade secrets here, but like, how are you leveraging 𝐬𝐿? And the reason I ask is because I have an opinion about. I've actually just written a lot about this recently, in like the last article that I did for my Substack about. Like that the personalization aspect isn't as important as the targeting aspect is. And I think that you and I have like a mind share on that topic. So I'm just curious what your thoughts are. Like, how are you leveraging 𝐬𝐿 to make either of those things better, or is it a blend of the two, or like, what do you do?
Yeah. Great question. So first just to talk about like the personalization, like relevance, like dichotomy, let's call it. Like, I think Eric Nosowski's talked about, right? Like if you have a campaign that works, and then you use kind of like fluffy personalization stuff, it tends to like, I think he says 2 to 3x, or let's say 1.5 to 3x like responsiveness, right? But importantly, and I think what people skip is like that already works, right? And so the point is to, you know, Patrick, like you're into guitars, right? Like someone saying like, oh, I know you're into guitars is not going to increase the likelihood of you buying Salesforce ever. Right? It might increase the likelihood that you're willing to talk to someone because you're like, oh, this is nice. They like researched me, but it's actually a complete false positive. It's like, it muddies things. And this is one of the things that like reps and like sales development people do terribly is if you go intention, like if your way of hacking from being like, this doesn't set meetings to meetings is some sort of whatever random thing, like you're not learning about the market, you know, you're like, it's just a waste of energy completely, in my opinion. Right. And so, to me, that's where like relevance though is not like asking like, why would a VP of sales want 𝐬𝐿, right? That's not relevant. That's like really vague. And so to me, relevance is like, how much can I make this deeply feel like it's like very intentional to this person? And then the scaled version is like, what are the shared, you know, you and I have shared attitudes about sales development. Someone could bucket us in like, dudes who have done a lot of sales development who aren't, like some, you could take all sales development leaders who have been doing it for X long. You could start to disqualify things against like trendiness, trendy companies, like all of these sorts of things, and you would end up with this like, the garbage men, right? And you could actually source this signal to the point that you're like, hey, dude, looks like you've been in sales development forever. You've worked with a bunch of companies that weren't Salesforce, so I'm sure XYZ resonates with you, and like that would hit on a one-to-one level. That feels personalized, right? It's like, yeah, this is me. This is like hitting on sort of my internal dialogue, but you can one-to-many that. You know what I mean? And I also think that like if the only way you can make something hit to someone is like one-to-one, you don't understand the market very well. You know what I mean? Like that's a bad place to be in, that like you can't. So there's this push and pull where like if you can't bucket the market, maybe there isn't a market, but at the same time, you want to be as specific as possible because that's what actually hits. And again, that's why I think like ongoing testing and like messing with this stuff is crazy valuable, even outside of the context of like revenue attribution. It's like most companies just have a very, very like immature it's like they could tell you like we do this, but they couldn't talk too much about like this is the market.
Yeah, and then like the point that you were on was like running experiments is super valuable, and then you like started that thought and it like clicked out right there.
Oh, okay. Yeah. Basically, just the experimentation stuff to me is really valuable for companies, like even outside of revenue attribution and pipeline. So it's like people are so thirsty for like that next meeting set or whatever that they're like desperate, and so they'll do like anything to try to like chase that, which is okay. It's like it's maybe supplementary, right? For like right now, it's like it might be that like in this month right now you need to go do XYZ crazy stuff to go like try to get these meetings set. But my lens is like the healthiest form of go to market is that you can send sort of like not crazy broad, but it's like you understand the market well enough that you don't have to do all that stuff, and that it's sort of like a negative signal that if the only way you can connect with your market is have like one individual research that person a bunch to make them feel really nice. And if they don't do that, no one gives a shit about what you do. That's not like an ascendant version of go to market. That's like worse.
So, what would you say is something tactical that somebody like myself that's just getting started with clay can do that's not just cheesy personalization? Because I think there's like, obviously there's a learning curve there. And like the easiest thing to do is like, okay, like pull their LinkedIn profile and then change the first sentence of my email to whatever they have written in their bio. Like I get emails like that all the time and I just immediately ignore it. I'm like, I know what you're doing. But like, I don't know, like what would be like the next step of like something you can try to figure out that's a little bit more clever than that?
Yeah. And I think it's easier too, actually, is like take your normal. So let's just say you sell to like marketing agencies, right? And like essentially if the first thing you do to me is think of what does everyone who targets this market do to pull these lists. And so like if you're targeting manufacturing, right? Like go into Apollo and pull manufacturers, right? If you target marketing agencies, whatever it is, and you load that into Clay. And the first thing you want to think about is like for the people that are our best market, sub niche within manufacturing, what is true of them? Like what would I categorize them as, right? We have a client right now. It's like discrete manufacturing, right? And it's like if they're a discrete manufacturer, there's some very specific benefits that this person can bring. And if they're not, they don't care. So what we do is we load all manufacturers, right, 20,000 companies or whatever, and then you use like a 𝐬𝐿 first, and you literally just go look at this. Like you create a prompt in like GPT, and you basically be like, I'm going to give you a manufacturer's website. I want you to look at this website, what they do, how they talk about themselves, blah, 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 blah. And I want you to categorize them as, and then you give it the categories, right? So let's say discrete, and literally it might be discrete versus non-discrete manufacturing first. So first you do like this research prompt, that's it. Then you have like an analysis prompt, like a second one, where you just have it like look at this brief and create the tag, right? And this will cost, for 20,000 records, this probably costs less than $10 to do this whole thing. You know what I mean? So it's like, it's practically free. So now you filter down from all manufacturers to discrete first, right? And so then of discrete manufacturers, I would again do the exercise of go like, okay, this, like, what are some just any buckets within discrete manufacturing? Because what's important here is knowing discrete manufacturing alone is going to stand out. But if I'm like, hey, Patrick, in discrete manufacturing environments that need to ship to multiple locations to finish production, blank. Now I'm like cooking, right? And if you had 20,000 things, it turns into 10,000 discrete manufacturers. Let's say you bucket it as multi-location, single location, and unknown, right? Because that's the other thing people miss a lot is like, don't just say yes and no, but also unknown. Because if it's unknown, so now we have like unknown discrete, multi-location discrete, known single location discrete. Now, when I go write this copy, I just tell them that, including the unknown. If I'm like, I was looking at discrete manufacturers, I can't tell if you guys operate out of a single facility or multiple. That hits. That's great. You know what I mean? Like totally works. And you can have static copy with this, right? You don't need to know any, like it is, the prompts can be very rough because you're just kind of going like, here's one company, go get a bunch of information off of its website, and you're just bucketing things. And even if you accidentally get some of these buckets wrong, you're being specific enough that, as you know, people like to correct you if you're a little bit wrong. So it's kind of like you just benefit just from being more specific, whether you're right, whether you're wrong, whether you can't even tell. You know what I mean? And like every single person could do this. And again, the lens is, what does everyone in this market, like how does everyone round out this target, and how could we bucket them in a way that we stand out as like, oh, this guy actually understands like the work ecosystem I exist in. It's nothing crazy. It's not the restaurant. It's just like simple stuff, acumen based. Like if your messaging can change based on the actual like strategy of what you do, that's the best personalization. You know what I mean? So not like, we de-anonymize your website visitors. Like, I saw that you like this band. It's better to be like, because your business, because your industry puts so much money into Google ads, we know that de-anonymization will have a large incremental benefit, versus going to like an agency like us and maybe like, hey, we know you guys probably don't have that crazy website visitors, but I know your annual contracts are worth this. If you do land one, even though it's only going to be a few people a week, would it be useful to have a tool like this, right? And like, it's just going to hit so much better.
Yeah, that's such a sick answer. Like, I'm already thinking about bookmarking this podcast when it comes out and like going back and listening to this again and then trying to figure out how to do what you're talking about, because it's awesome.
It's like you can do this. Like it's one of the things I think people get so mixed up about Clay. Again, it's why I say like the strategy stuff is so important. Is like, if the job to be done is someone's like, I'm trying to figure out how to create a first line to blah, blah, blah. It's like, there's all these like technicalities and things you can mess up. But if you zoom out and you're just like, what are we trying to do here? We're trying to connect to the market. Why isn't it working right now? Because the thing we say to them is like too general, doesn't hit. What do we need to do? Like, be more specific, and Clay becomes easy because it's just like familiar object types, like company, contact. It's these like wild Clayagent prompts. It's just like, go look at a bunch of stuff. And then you like reel it in with tags. The alpha in this also is like use select, like as a field type. They have text, and then they have select. Select, you can tell it what like term, like you could give it 3 answers, and it's always going to output one of those. And so that can be nice for like get unstructured text return research, and then force it into a structured tagging architecture, and then you write your messages off.
I have a few email questions.
Yeah.
When you work with clients, if you're breaking things down in detail, do you ever get pushback from your clients? Like, oh no, I want it to sound like this. And you kind of got to, you have this idea on how it's going to work, right? You do this for a living. And then you have a client that pushes back and kind of against, like, how do you navigate that versus like, hey, I know this is what we want and what is the best way to go approach this, versus a client being very picky about, I want it to sound like this?
Yeah, it's a good question. It's so like, I don't even know what there's like, I feel like you can get bit from every version of this, right? So like I've done versions, like my favorite is compete. Like I think the cleanest one is it's just like, hey John, that's awesome. If you think this is going to go really well, my preference would be half of our volume. We'll do it your way. Let me do it my way, half of it. In 2 weeks, we'll be able to talk about who's right. How's that sound? And I'm like, and I could be wrong, A lot of times though, the problem is it's like, if they care enough, they care a lot. And then, so like, sometimes, sometimes I just go like, hey, look, if you like, I'll tell them just like, I don't think this is going to work. If this is really what you want to do, like, let's do this first. The problem is like some percentage of those people are going to like turn doing exactly what they basically like strong arm you into doing, and every time that happens for me, I'm kind of like, I probably shouldn't have just, so I don't know. But similarly, there's times, cause like I don't believe in just doing, like, I hate when a client's like, just do whatever you think will work. You know what I mean? Because for me, it's like, that's a lot of pressure for like an outsider. You know what I mean? I want to, and I think it can be different for clients in that like I'm a very high friction person. I'm super direct. I'm very like open. And so it's like, if I disagree with you, we're going to talk about it. And sometimes I think that can be, people are very sensitive. And so people can feel that like that's like battling them. And it's like, no, like the friction of these ideas will sort of like generate the most like ascendant outcome, but it takes both sides participating, So that's why I think like best is like, let's compete, let this be a little fun. We'll figure it out. I would say my next preference is probably just like doing what they want. And then like my last preference is just because if someone's like, just do what you want, I'm like, you're probably about to turn no matter what I'm about to do, because like that sounds like you can't even articulate what success would be, and that you're like Hail Marying some vague, something.
Yeah. We tend to do what you said is like, we'll split it. We'll go half this way, half your way, and just kind of like give it a few weeks to a month, and then we'll see what's working best and then go with that campaign. But yeah, it can be tricky, and sometimes it's not even what's being said, but it's like, this tends to be a little bit with marketing people. They'll take your email that you created and they'll triple the length. And you're just like, look, this isn't an ebook. Like, we're trying to, be very direct and keep it under 100 words or whatever it may be. But it's just like, that's kind of sometimes the battle is not even what's being said, but it's like the length, or like, hey, I want to include the links here. And we're like, sorry, we just can't for email deliverability purposes. Like, we're trying to, like in your case, get a response and understand if this is important to them, and having them click links and tracking it on top of that is just not what is going to work. Like, anyways, those are some of the battles we have to try to figure out with some of our clients.
Yeah, we get like the Clay version of that also is like, one is complexity of campaigns, right? So like, I'm good at ideas, and so sometimes I'll accidentally suggest something that's like a nightmare to actually run, and like there's times like it's kind of hard to explain, but it's like there's times that like you could do like directionally an idea. It's like, this is a great idea, but we could do this really quickly. And clients are like real hooked on like, no, this sounds really cool. So we had one where it was like, we were going to, and like, especially, so basically it's like, we're going to reach out to like we're going to reach out to a COO and then like a department leader for a department that's basically like a cost center, non-strategic annoyance to these businesses. And the idea of this campaign was like, we're going to make this like very businessy argument to the COO. And then we're going to reach out to this department leader and we're going to tell them that we reached out to the COO and like, and kind of like, hey, just so you know this. And we're going to like, so we're mentioning both of them for both of these. And what was hard is like, there's so it's like a department lead sort of, but there could be like one to many of these department leads for the one COO. And so basically the idea was like, oh, we should like reference these things, right? And the real benefit of this idea is like a COO being like, oh, I also reached out to like department head. That's going to like, that's unique. And then the department guy getting this, it's going to be like, oh shoot, like my boss is getting this. And both of them were offering to like send them like a calculator thing, essentially. It was like a cool idea. And then like essentially my client was just like, he only wanted to send if we had both of the people. He only like, it just started being like more and more specific to the point that it was like, yo, this is a ton of work and there's not that much people that are getting like an output of this. You know what I mean? And it became like definitely one of those things that was like, well, we spent 5 times as much time as any client ever doing this. We sent it to like 1/10 the size of the population that we thought we should have. And by now, no one's all that excited about this because this was like laborious, where it didn't need to be, because it's, as you can like when you're the like kind of testing motion, it's like, let's just really quickly get something out there and like see if there's something to this. Well, we can optimize it down the line, but don't, so. What
we've done, and we run into situations like this from time to time, is it like keeps getting more and more specific, is we end up just having to show them, whether it be on a live call or a recorded Loom. It's like, look, this is exactly what we're seeing. You can see the same thing by eliminating this department or this industry. We now have 500 contacts to go after. And that will last us like whatever that amount of time is based on the channel. So you kind of like got to show them for them to realize, oh, okay, I see what this is creating. Because otherwise they kind of like from distance can just start pointing, hey, let's do it like that. But yeah, it just makes it harder if you don't have enough people to reach out to.
Yeah.
Okay. Last question for me. I think I had asked this earlier, but we just got into other discussions, but like, where do you see email going? Like, I know it's hard to predict, but it's certainly changing. It has over time since I got into the agency space, and I stepped out of it a little bit. I'm curious to get your thoughts because you're in it, and this is your main channel. Like, what do you see? How is it changing? Give me your thoughts.
Yeah, I think it's, to me, like the way I've had it described to me that I agree with is like the utility of a person who you've never talked to before sending you an email is extremely high. Like it's extreme, like that is a primary utility of email, is like a person you've never talked to, you subscribe to a new newsletter, that's what happens. Like you get introduced to someone, that's what happens. Like there's a million positive use cases. And so I don't think in like filtration against these things is not easy. Like the cybersecurity industry is like this massive industry that's like essentially mirrors the concept of like good actor, bad actor, digital footprint stuff, And so I think, maybe there's a world where things get really gnarly and it's like really hard to run. But my general belief, like my faith in this concept would be that I think that it'll be like a cat and mouse forever. I think there's periods where like deliverability and stuff is like a little bit more of a challenge. I don't think there will ever be like a sunset of cold email as like a feasible channel. You know what I mean? It's like a relatively like public protocol. And so I think it's going to be there for a long time. I think, to me, people actually blame deliverability for them just like sucking at it. Like I sincerely, deeply believe that a lot of like deliverability is this really convenient like black box, and it's real. It's not like it's BS, but there's a lot of people. It's like, look, if your list sucks, don't blame deliverability. If your copy's terrible, like if it's just at face value, like not tied in what would work or whatever, like it's not deliverability. If you're using cheeseball reseller, blah, 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 blah. So people cut so many corners. They're so cheap. They're so amateur. And then it's like deliverability. My lens is like, I'm not the most technical guy. I'm not the most risk averse guy. We don't do anything that's like particularly crazy. And we've had zero month, not even single months for clients where I've looked at a result and felt like the primary driver of that result was deliverability versus our current ability to like articulate who's our market and what do we do for them, right? We have campaigns right now that book clients 2 to 3 meetings a month or a day that we've been running the exact same copy for call it 6 months, that we get 10% bounce rate on because it's like challenging data basically. And it just books and books and books and books and books. And we've been able to charge more and it just books, and we don't do anything and it books and we don't, you know what I mean? And so like, I deeply, and like, if you think about it, a lot of cold email agencies, like their game is higher volume. A lot of them aren't using Clay well to be that like targeted necessarily, And so in that environment, you are knowingly sending to people who they themselves will look at your message and be like, this shouldn't go to me. This is really stupid. And they're marking you as spam. And I think that is like 90% of deliverability issues, is like you're sending to people who are marking you as spam because your stuff sucks. And if you target well, like we get very extremely low negative responses to our campaigns. We don't have magically high response, positive response, but we don't get people going like, why the hell did I just get this? You know what I mean? And so
yeah,
to me, that's like, it's like if you are able to participate in email in a way where you're not having yourself explode, like I think there's like a forever future in it. But transactional people will look for like easier and easier things where they don't have to operate with that level of like precision.
Yeah, I certainly don't think it's going away. The question is how will it work, or how will it operate, right? Like if you, let's say, Kellen, you and I were talking and you want to introduce me to Patrick, and Patrick and I have never communicated before, like what, the email bounces? Like, no, the email's going to go through. It would just be a terrible thing that we couldn't email each other, right? So the question is like, at what scale does it start getting more challenging? But I think we'll always be open.
Well,
right?
and
you
like
just need to be able to email people.
Because like the solution provider side is literally like if you think of the footprint you're creating, if I have a Google domain and it has one inbox on it and that sends 20 emails a day, that's the footprint. You know what I mean? And so it's like, where it falls apart is trying to send crazy amounts of volume off of like small nodes on your side. And that's why like you just need lots of nodes and redundancy and diversification of where those nodes come from. So even if you got like deplatformed from Google, that you can continue sending off other stuff.
All right, Kellen, thanks for coming on. Any closing words, anything you want to say before we sign out?
No, I think this is just fun, dude. I appreciate it. This is a good time. Go find my LinkedIn if you want to ask something, I guess.
Yeah. So tell us where people can find you. Is it LinkedIn's best, website, Twitter?
Yeah, probably LinkedIn. I think LinkedIn, like Kellen Casebeer on LinkedIn. My website's thedeallab.com. I think. But yeah, if anyone has questions, I think LinkedIn's the best place to hit me up, and I get back to everybody.
Okay. I'll also put the link to that in the description.
So,
Thanks for coming on. Thanks, Patrick. Thanks, Kellen.
Yep.
thank you guys. Be well. See ya.